Welcome to episode 100. That's kind of crazy. Episode 100? What the hell? Episode 100 of What is Civilization started over. In the last episode, we had a number of events which I completely forgot about. And, we saw the invasion of the whatever the area of China that is. I was going to Sichuan. I think it's probably Sichuan, right? Okay, provinces. Yeah, somewhere around there. Yunnan or Sichuan. The Chinese invaded that old sort of rose-colored country. We saw a war occur in North America because Newfoundland was invaded. They made one in South America. I'm not sure if they invaded that random bluish country that was there. I'm not good at remembering this. The Persians also invaded the Middle East, and that was probably about it. We saw some other economic alliance and just general alliance growth. As if we look into Europe, Pax Arabia, don't worry about that. I might need it for the events of today's episode just to get colours. But the European alliance actually, I think, stayed the same. However, the circle one. However, a new alliance was created, the Trapezium alliance between the Italians and the Polish. So that's pretty interesting. It wasn't really a reason given, it just happened. And then the Western European alliance grew to include Alsace and the West German country. Other than that, I think the rest of the alliances stayed the same. And then ideologically, something pretty major happened because we saw the creation of a new ideology, the Franglo ideology, which will in fact be expanding at the start of today's episode, because a really major ally of the Franglo country is the Alsace one right here. They had neutrality built into their constitution pre their invasion by Germany. However, now since they've got independence, they can actually align with the side, and they're aligning with the Germans more. They're aligning with the Franco Union and technically the Netherlands, but this ideology is doing pretty well so far. It's been implemented for not very long, like the start of today's episode, which is in 2010, and it was basically 2010 when it occurred last episode, but it looks like it would maybe do well, so other countries might be quite interested. There's a lot of democracy, and a lot of countries, especially in these broken up areas like China, they don't think democracy is failing. It's just that more of their countries aren't doing as well as they would like them to do. But some countries believe democracy is a failure, and they're also kind of like, authoritarianism isn't always great. I need to update this because there's a lot of countries who've been eliminated. Anyway, that's pretty cool. Nuclear bombs is another thing I need to talk about. Not because they was making them actually, but in the Indo-Chinese invasion of this country over here in Sichuan, they also took the nuclear bombs from that country. They had 3. They didn't fire any of them off, which is nice of them. Try to preserve the world and keep it alive. It's not going to destroy the world or anything. They're kind of old post-World War III ones. But there you go. Indochina is now up to 6, but they can also create their own. So, they're going to go up to 10. I mean, not up to 12. That's quite a lot. Their industry in nuclear bombs is a lot smaller than other countries, so that's kind of why. And then Korea is going to go all the way up to 9. So their industry is more powerful than the Indo-Chinese one. However, these guys just stole their nukes effectively from another country, so that's why. There are a lot of nukes in East Asia and just Asia in general, which is kind of interesting and maybe pertinent towards today's episode. Anyway, over here in Russia, we also see them develop some more nukes. It seems like in the last episode they might have sold a lot of nukes, so in today's episode they're going to be a bit exhausted for producing nukes, only creating 6 and not selling any overseas. Whilst over here in the Arabic Union, the Franco Union. Also, I'm very ill. My throat is destroyed. I've got quite a great headache, so good job, me. Actually, I don't even know. It's just my immune system sucks. Anyway, let's get all this stuff in today's episode, shall we? And because I want to update economic alliance, I think, probably. I think that's when I want to update. Pax Arabia, by the way, I'm not going to turn the layer on because I don't want to show you what it looks like. But it's if the Arabic Union won World War III and what that would look like in a map, which is really, really cool. I'm currently making Pax China, and then I'll make Pax Russia. I kind of want them to have IA at the end of their name, but that's not achievable, really, so oh well. I don't think we're going to see expansion of African economic alliances, and to be honest, the European one, or the Western European one, is only really going to add one new country, and it's a little guy. I need to get... And by very little, I don't really mean that little. I mean Romania. Romania's joining the alliance. They're right over here, and they use the Franglo currency, so that's why. As for currencies around the world, because the currency layer exists, I mean they're kind of interesting and weird. Lots of it's a currency built alliance, except for the Norwegians in Western Europe. So they're all using the same currency as you. Okay, damn it. They're all using the same currency as you can see. I just grab this. Boom, same currency. Except Norway, just like in the EU, they have a separate deal which allows them to use the Norwegian currency. There's some really random ones, like um, Java is the only country in the world that uses the Swedish currency. Not even Norway uses the Swedish currency. That's weird. You have the British one. The Kerguelen Islands does, which is why I put them into the Nations Alliance. I really should get on with the actual video stuff because, you know, I kind of need to do that. And there's a lot of Carthaginian countries down here for no reason. Anyway, video time. Let's actually power rankings first. Power rankings, it's 2010. Franco-Union's at number 1. Korea and Russia is at number 3. So they've now overtaken the Gangetic country, and they're on the way back up. Apart from that, nothing else has changed. Pretty cool. We do need to go back to the economic alliance layer because we can do that later. But yeah, actually we need to go to Russia. As you may have seen in the thumbnail, Russia's on the thumbnail, and that's scary. But things in Russia aren't as well as they seem. The Russian economy may be on the way back up, and the Russian forecast for its economic growth, military power, and everything to do with being a country is pretty good. However, people are very, very discontent within Russia at the moment because of just how segregated society is. People over here in the Central Asian regions of the country have much worse, and kind of like all of this, much worse lives than people over here. So maybe this isn't a completely accurate map because the Uralic people over here, actually the Uralian area, I went into Astrakhan, never mind. The Uralia, Muscovy, maybe also this bit is Muscovy, and then you have the Western Russians, which includes kind of Angria, and the Baltics is kind of split off, and then there's Ukraine, and you have these Central Asian countries like Astrakhan, and you just the Central Asians over here. Basically, the Uralics and the Muscovites and the Western Russians, like Angria and Kirov, whatever, they're the best off in this country. It's technically union. The Baltic country people and the Ukrainians, they're also pretty fairly well treated. But over here in Central Asia, there's huge marginalization of the populations. It's much harder for them to get jobs, and it's generally pretty bad. They've enforced a lot of laws to make it so Russian is the first language people learn in this country, which kind of makes sense, seeing as they live in Russia. But a lot of these people, their first language is their regional language. Like people over here in the North Aral area might learn Aral language before they learn Russian. But Russia wants to change that because they want to centralize this land. They're very afraid of their country falling apart, so they've imposed lots of harsh laws on the people. And we see this cause huge revolts across the Russian state as people start to get incredibly annoyed, and then they get brutally suppressed. The two areas where there's the biggest revolts are in the North Aral area and the Baikal area. Maybe not the largest in Baikal, but the most out of the people living there doing revolt stuff. Just because there's not many people that live north of the Lake Baikal, but definitely in the Aral Republic area, this is probably the biggest population that's doing stuff. So that's caused a lot of different political views. It's been brutally suppressed, which is good stuff. Of course, it's been brutally suppressed. But some people now in the Muscovy and Uralia areas are thinking that those areas should secede from Russia and make their own perfected Russian country without these racial minorities. Some people want to just purge absolutely everybody who isn't Russian, which is kind of crazy. Maybe you shouldn't do that. And some people just think it should be more imposed laws, that maybe they should be more liberal instead and just let them have their own freedoms and more autonomy. There's a whole lot of different things, and the autocrat of this country is trying to figure stuff out. When he gets a radioactive caused disease, which is kind of funny because he nuked a lot of the world, and he dies, which causes a huge power vacuum to appear in Russia, as all of these different politically ideas, different autocrat people try to take control of Russia, and a number of bad things happen. Starting over here in the Aral Republic, we see pro-Aral rebels pop up under the leadership of some random democratic guy, and that's kind of interesting. Yeah, should that be happening? I don't know. The Aral Republic is going to make the thing I wanted to do, the economic alliances, and I didn't do. And that's the choice to join the Brit Indian Economic Alliance, which is kind of weird. However, it's effectively a combined version of both of those, both the Central Asian and which alliance which they created, the Civilization Economic Alliance, and the Indian Economic Alliance. So they will join this, which will better their economy. They're also going to change their currency, but I'll do that. Well, maybe I will. I'll probably forget, to be honest. But yeah, they see this huge rebellion pop up here in the Aral areas, and their economy is kind of better because, well, it's not going to be an instant thing, but they're able to kind of help out the rebels a bit more, funding them. And Russia's going to get very annoyed at the South Aral Republic, putting more troops on the border of this country. Also, over here in the eastern, we're going to see more rebels pop up, this time in northern Baikal, along the northern side of Lake Baikal, and also around some of these other lake areas. Not many people live here, especially since they lost access to the Pacific Ocean, so all around these more southern cities of the nation, we see major things occur. Even on the border of Mongolia, which is kind of weird, because Mongolia is an ally of Russia, so yeah, kind of concerning. The Russians will send troops over for this one, however, and they do pretty well, absolutely just slamming into the forces of this area. But the important thing to note is that these people, they kind of claim to be South Baikal people, and that's interesting, because South Baikal is getting very, very annoyed by this, and ultimately, they don't manage to get a new ruler. People are very discontented with the country, and violence just started against all of these Central Asian peoples, as it seems the guy who wanted to purge everybody, who wasn't like the good Russian, they say, he got into power, and as they start just absolutely massacring people within this country, things start to go badly. This entire Aral group is completely destroyed. This bit's cut off, and the people here are brutally murdered by ICE, not by ICE, but kind of the same, like paramilitary trooper people. These people are all separated off, and we're going to see even wider scale rebellions pop up. Okay, so we see all these large Central Asian rebellions pop up in the Russian country, and they're going to try and do something about this, but this is a lot of people, and quite quickly these front lines are going to centralize. We see forces leave the Aral area as the forces around here manage to link up once again, or the rebel groups around here. Over in the Orange country, a lot of people are going to work together with the Aral kind of South Aral Republic to kind of close in this southern area. However, lots of people here are kind of very pro this, so they managed to gain a lot of support from their southern territories, linking up across their southern border. However, the Russians over here will manage to remove this other group. The capital, I think, is over here, so they're kind of fine, but not great. The Pink Country has two major areas, and these two areas are going to link up, capturing another major city. And once again, we see this sort of move to take over all of this stuff in this area. The Dark Green Country is also pretty well enclosed, and they managed to push down here towards the Mid Country's border. The Mid Country is going to do something kind of controversial, sending in their own military, but not officially declaring war. It's just they're kind of cloaking themselves as Russian military troops, and they managed to push in and take a major city. However, a certain country over here is going to threaten them with war, which would really, really escalate this conflict if they declare war on them. But Russia's not really in a spot to fight back, so maybe it'd be fine. But we see this major area in the south basically just fall apart as a split between Xinjiang and Pink Team forces, so that's pretty cool. The Blue Team doesn't have a huge sort of national identity, but they managed to take over some more stuff in these cities, and they're very centralized and cored territory, whilst the Red Team over here really doesn't. They're split into two major areas, and the Russian military is able to take out this huge western one, separating off these northern guys. Back over here in the Baikal area, a lot of people are supporting this one, and Russian troops had to flee from this area once again to go and deal with ones more in the center, and that's causing a huge collapse on the Russian front line over here, as we see Korean aid now start to trickle in towards the Baikal country, and huge areas of the nation, or of the Russian Far East, start to fall apart as these areas start to link up along the northern border. The Russians, fortunately, will have a pretty good idea, and that's just absolutely try to just win. They send a load of forces into this Far Eastern territory, and they're going to completely crush the rebellion that pops up in this area. However, this one over here is proving to be a lot more stubborn, and that's pretty bad. Now, at this point, we're going to see more and more resources flood in to try and help the rebellions in the Russian country, because basically nobody likes Russia at this point. It's an autocratic regime, which is, the Federal Union is kind of technically autocratic, but nobody really likes it that much. The Koreans don't, the Chinese don't, the Mesopotamians don't, pretty much all of Asia doesn't, apart from Pakistan maybe. So yeah, it's kind of interesting stuff, really. The Aral group is getting a lot of funding now. In fact, the majority of the funding is going to the Aral country. Well, not majority, but like the biggest portion of it. And they managed to retake some coastal stuff, linking up all of their forces. we're going to see another major rebellion pop up in this area. And as I said before, the Astrakhan country is kind of slightly better, which regarded as slightly better than other Central Asian groups, but even now these guys are rebelling away, taking over a lot of stuff, and the Russians realize this is some pretty core territory to them, so they're going to slam a load of forces onto the Volga River, managing to take a lot of the land around it, but not all of it. But Astrakhan is pushed back. Naval dominance is secured in the Caspian Sea by the Russians, so these guys can't really link up across there. However, the Aral country is going to join the war, literally declaring war on Russia. These guys say, like the Tajikistan country in Mongolia say, you know what, it's actually a defensive war to help the rebels, so we're not going to get involved with this huge coalition, because technically all of these rebels count themselves as part of the allies to the Aral Republic. With the actual threat of war, the Russians are going to start to push in a huge amount of forces towards the Aral country, moving them away from the east, which is definitely going to be to their own detriment. They managed to push around to this territory, and from here Russia is going to start their invasion into the Aral country. And yeah, maybe kind of screwed up here. The Southern Aral Republic isn't super strong. However, they have a lot of nationalism, and a huge fire happens over here, killing like a fire, I mean like an explosion trap thing, which kills a major general of the Russian military, resulting in a huge pushback. So Russia is going to go to some pretty dire measures, which is yeah, you know this cool green layer I've got. Well, the Russians are going to drop some more nukes on the capital of the Aral country, which definitely not a nice thing to do. The Aral Republic's capital's already been nuked before, but they're going to do it again. What? I didn't pick up the right green. Goodbye, capital city, and then also goodbye other cities, which includes one they're occupying at this point, but actually probably wouldn't nuke that. Maybe this one right here in the middle. This war is definitely not going well for these guys. The Russians are going to have another major counteroffensive against them now, as morale is kind of broken in the Aral country since they've been nuked once again, bringing back horrible memories since they were the first country to be nuked. It's happened to them again. They got nuked in the war, World War III, and yeah, things kind of suck. We're going to see another country join, however, which is of course going to be the South Baikal country. And since the Baikal region isn't super important to the Russians, this is the main region that they withdrew troops from, and that was kind of a big mistake, because a lot of this area is going to come under the control of the rebels. I would say the pink team's helping, but they're definitely not, because what the hell are they meant to do? They're going to make a pretty good front line towards some of these cities, which are slowly being more enforced. However, Russia is fighting a huge front war against a lot of different areas, so the Baikal country is having quite a lot of success. Back over here to the south, another area where they withdrew troops was from down here, as we see the blue team and the dark green country work together to take over more of this territory. The blue team is going to try to work out towards the orange group, however, no, dark reddish, rusty colored group. However, this area has basically collapsed all on its own, and that's kind of a shame. However, these forces down here in these southern areas are much more centralized altogether, and they're going to work well to push up northwards against the Russian attacks. The pink team is going to work with the orange team to take some of this stuff, whilst the orange team is going to lose ground over here in the west in a second when I get around to it. But they take ground over in the east. How are they losing ground in the west? Well, you see the Russians are over here, and what Russia's going to do is start a two-pronged invasion now into these eastern areas of the Aral Republic, but they managed to push beyond there. However, this will allow them to regain some territory they lost to the Orange Rebellion. So you can kind of see where the Russian troops are. Somewhere where they really aren't anymore because they sent them across the Caspian Sea is over here in the Aral country. They lose, the Aral country can't take a lot of the coastal stuff. However, over here by the Volga River, they are taking a lot of territory, and they're even getting aid from the Caucasians. I also need to remember that 2 nuclear bombs hit the Aral country. Nice, right, cool. Back to the Civil War. So the Aral country is not having a great time here. However, a number of other bad things are going to occur because they're very, very ancient. It's not even on this layer. Let's go to what the layer 30 look like. Yeah, you exist then. The Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are rebelling now. Kind of centralized over here in this sort of central, same color as Baikal. Central Ukrainian area. They're going to take over a lot of stuff, and that's because of a huge amount of aid, mostly from Romania, which is interesting. Because it's not from Romania, it's from the Franco Union and their allies, but it's flooding into the Ukrainian country as they take over the entire Crimean Peninsula. A lot of the southern Black Sea territory isn't all that Russian, really, and the Caucasians are now kind of being this route in between the Astrakhan and Ukrainian nations, so that kind of sucks. as Ukraine takes over the entire Black Sea coast over here in this eastern region, the Russians are going to divert some forces over here from this front, passing by the Astrakhan country to retake their coast, but they don't push any further than that, and moving over here to the Ukrainians, taking their capital, I'm pretty sure, but they're still pretty well in Crimea, and after this, they have to move back a bit, and they retake control, linking up both their territories. Here in the Aral Republic, they actually seem losses to the Aral country, so that really sucks, because you shouldn't be losing to a country that's this small. But Tibet has really started to do things, and okay, what? I'm living in the Mint country at this point. I'm so afraid. I really don't want to be living in this country. You're in a horrible spot. The Orange team now is going to start to retake land from the Russians as they take this city back, and they really start to push northwards once again. Popularity of the Russian state in a civil war that's been lasting probably over a year now. It's pretty bad. They're losing a lot of ground to rebellious areas, and hopefully your country wouldn't be doing that. But the blue team's also doing really well against them, which is surprising because it's the blue country. However, there's not that many cities like just here. Apparently none of them have been nuked in this territory, so that's really good for you guys. But the dark green country starts to move up, and we're even going to see another rebellion pop up over here in the red country, with finally more red team rebels appearing in this territory, retaking the cities here, and also retaking this stuff with linkages across the south. The Baikal military, which is not super strong, will move across the border of Mongolia, who's just kind of defending their border and hoping nothing happens. They're also going to retake all of these cities, which have been heavily nuked and are effectively just worthless. But yeah, we see a link up between all these areas, and now there's one consolidated front in these southern areas of the Russian country, apart from Astrakhan and Ukraine, which are doing their own things. So that's really, really kind of bad for the Russians. Anyway, what does Russia have that they can use to try and weaken other countries around them? I don't know, man. What do you think they can do? What should Russia do? I don't know. Let's just grab a green for something. No, okay. For no reason. Yep, so they're going to nuke the city there in Crimea. They're going to nuke this part of Astrakhan. They're going to nuke this bit as well. That's 3 already. We see a nuclear bomb drop in your capital city, a nuclear bomb drop in your capital, I'm pretty sure. That's 5. 1 drop on this city, and let's drop another one on this city. That's now 7. You can get nuked over here. The Aral Republic, yeah, why not? You get nuked in your capital, and also this one too. So I think that's, maybe not that one. I think it's 9 nuclear bombs. So the Russians are now down to 45. They will see a pretty huge surge in popularity for the military, and the military starts to do a lot better, especially in the regions which they drop nuclear bombs on. People of their country who are like actually Russian are very much like, oh, this is great, our country is the best, and we're so freaking awesome. As they manage to retake land from all of these rebellions, as they start to lose morale in kind of looking at the Russian military and how scary it is. The Aral country is even starting to lose land once again. However, maybe things will get better for them, but probably not. The big team in the dark green country will hold their ground, however, because they're not really afraid of you guys. They're not super afraid. They've just been, a few thousands of people have been lost, but a lot of money is flowing in from nations like Tibet, and at this point, we've seen more rebellions pop up. Okay, so 3 new rebellions popped up, this time in the Baltic, very, very distant from the rest of the rebellions in this country, but kind of on the outer fringes of what would be described as Russia. But these areas will quickly take over their territories. Russian people around here are West Russian, which isn't quite the same as the rest of Russia. I think on the culture layer it's like the Ingrian color. But these guys are going to do a really good job at clearing out this territory, kind of maybe because of this guy, who literally went into Russia and stole 6 nuclear bombs from them. But yeah, good job you guys, as they start to completely consolidate their areas, countries, and they're kind of like, hey Russia, do you want to go to peace? Because I'm willing to just be my own country if you let me do that. Over here, the Russians are going to withdraw troops from Ukraine once again, allowing them to push back out into these southern Ukrainian territories. They don't fully take over the Black Sea coast, but they get kind of close. Over here to the Caspian area, once again, they are losing ground in the Aral country. What isn't new? What's new, I mean. There you go. But here they're actually losing land over in the west, because they're kind of worried that the Orange country is having a huge resurgence and it managed to reconnect up with this territory, so that kind of sucks. The Orange country is once again doing really, really well in this war. Are there any other countries that want to get involved? Because currently it's just a lot of rebellions and Russia. But Russia's not doing that well. So yeah, I guess we'll continue on with the civil war. Over here, the main areas I want to capture are kind of this southern territory, so a lot of the focus is going to move over to the Aral country because they see them as the main point of importance. As Orange Team's troops start to really move northwards, along with, I guess, all the other Central Asian rebels, they want to get to this area, which I think is probably in Euralia. People there are currently kind of pro-Russian, but they're moving away from it, as the Civil War's probably lasted for about 2 years now at this point, into about 2012. The Dark Green Rebellion is probably one of the stronger ones, and they're going to start to work up towards this territory, moving kind of in a spearhead at this point towards that area. They're going to work their militaries together with the other rebellions they suffered in the Blue Country and the Pink Country, with similar sort of backgrounds and culture. They're kind of able to do that, and the Red Team working with Baikal is able to just take over a huge amount of land without really any major cities in it, but just land. So that's really awesome. Baikal hasn't secured much of this other northern territory because nobody's going up there, but the troops of the southern Baikal country effectively declare unification with the rest of the Baikal people, and they managed to retake all of this. With basically no Russian troops in this territory, they just haven't really got up there yet. So a few countries are willing to go to peace, especially you guys, but also, I mean, Central Asia is all doing really well. The Russians are going to start to send forces over here into the Baltic region to try and push back against these rebellions. They've taken over quite a few very major and wealthy cities, and they push into Estonia and whatever part, like Litguria or something, or Latguria, whatever it's called. They will retake this nuked city. However, this causes something pretty major, which is the rebellion over here in the, yeah, you can see Russia fell apart in Pax Arabia. In the Ingrian country, as they declared their independence away from Russia, which is kind of scary for the Russians. This is a pretty wealthy country from the past. They don't really do a whole lot in the past, but they had their own, they've retaken over all of this. That's a lot. But they work to push back against the Russians. Russian forces are now trapped in these territories, and they suffer a huge defeat to just a lot of rebels, really. And, you know, they have some military generals, because lots of people who were born in these areas were going to go back to them and actually fight for their independence instead. And apparently, some people say there's some volunteer troops from Western Europe and Poland, and even Italy, fighting on these fronts. Apparently, there's quite a few Romanians on this front. Who would have known? Definitely not me making this up. But the Ukrainians are going to start to push back into the southern Ukrainian areas, which is going to cause more and more distress as Russia effectively loses all access to the Black Sea until they finally do, being reliant upon countries like Caucasia and the Romanian country, who decide to stop allowing Russian ships access to their country, which means Russia is effectively very much trapped at this point. They have the White Sea, but apart from that, they've got the Caspian, I guess. It's just not a good spot for Russia, and things are going to get even worse as their troops suffer even more failures in the Aral front. As the Aral country reconnects up with the Caspian Sea, the Orange country rebellion is going to move even further up north, taking a few more cities around here, and at this point, Russia is going to effectively stop being a union between the Uralic and the Muscovy peoples. As Russia kind of just does their own thing, the government doesn't collapse or anything, but at this point, it's really not exactly Russia anymore. The idea of a union between the Muscovy and the Uralic country has kind of fallen apart. I'm not sure I really like the screen over here. But what we're going to see now is Uralic rebels. Okay, on the wrong layer. Uralic rebels pop up against the Russian state, and they manage to take over a lot of land. They want to redeclare their own country, and they start to move southwards, retaking old territory they lost a very long time ago. Or, they had, but it was their capital a very long time ago. As the capital of this country will remain over here in the west, but it's not the same. The Astrakhan area has seen a huge influx of stuff, and at this point, with the Russian state barely even being the old Russian state it was before, a lot of troops are going to withdraw, go home to their old areas. Now with Euralia kind of declaring its independence in its own country or nation state, things are going to get even worse in Russia as troops start to really flood out the Aral Republic until finally all of them is left, and the Aral Republic will start to move its own troops into the northern regions, and it's not really like there's a whole load of opposition over here as they link up with the Astrakhan territories, and a few Russian troops are encircled in this area until they're all defeated. Russia is going to get even worse from this point, surprise, surprise, as the Dark Green country reaches over to this territory, retaking that and sparking more sort of Central Asian revolts and rebellions in this territory. The Pink Revolt is going to take over this territory, and the Baikal, or the Uralic Revolt, which has a lot of very important military people involved with it, will be extremely successful, taking over a lot of land. The red team and the blue team going to work together to retake, or to take over, not retake, they've never been this big, take over all of this territory. And over here in Western Russia, we're going to see something kind of depressing happen, which is Muscovy even declares independence from Russia, now breaking away in a rebellion that looks this big, and that's absolutely huge. They start to move in towards the capital city, but they don't retake it, and in fact, Russian troops and a new Russian dictator, like the fourth one, the Civil War, which is maybe into its third year at this point, will do a really good job of pushing back the Muscovy rebellion. However, they don't manage to push back the Ingrian rebellion, which starts to move a lot further west and south. The Lilac one is also going to do a similar sort of thing, moving down towards the areas of Ukraine, which they managed to link up to. This is the biggest this country will ever be. Ukraine is going to also work up with these guys, and they start to move into these southern Russian areas over here in Western Europe, Eastern Europe, damn it, it's the west of the world though. They move up once again into the Volga River, retaking this entire thing for the Astrakhan country, and Russia's now kind of being split into multiple pieces. The Blue Arrow Rebellion is going to move up into this territory too. But once again, the Uralic military is actually really, really good. Or the Uralic Rebellion military, and they've managed to take over a lot of land they once owned. We see a major rebellion that's kind of effectively spearheaded by the the Baikal country, take all this land over for these people, and at this point, they're having to withdraw back to their very old land. We see a major Muscovy led uprising appear over here in the north. This isn't quite realistic, but it kind of is. And officially or effectively, they take over these islands, but not entirely. The Ukrainian rebels here in the south are going to continue to work up towards the capital city, and they're doing a really good job at recreating their old Ukrainian borders. We see Muscovy retake some land that they lost a really long time ago, or not that long ago, to the new central government, which is going to have its leader assassinated, and then the next one assassinated, and probably the next one assassinated. As Russia falls apart, there are most definitely volunteer troops from alliances all around the world, even from America, fighting over here in this country, and the Astrakhan and Uralic militaries will do an excellent victory, separating this country into two. And from here, we see Uralian troops take over the south, just like this, and Muscovy troops take over the north, just like this. And then there is the final battle for the core territories of the old Russian state. Astrakhan troops start to move into the west, retaking this new major city over here and taking this one right in the east. Ingrian troops are also going to push in, however they're kind of stopped. The Ukrainian ones start to push towards both these nuked ones, with this city and the capital being the last holdouts of the Russian country. Going to take off nukes, because 45 nukes are not all in the capital. They're really, really spread out. A lot of these countries and rebellions will have their own nukes now, but they link up with the Ukrainian front here and also around there, retaking this major city for their control as they move in towards the capital city. And in one final pretty huge battle, the leader of the city is assassinated and they win, defeating what was once Russia and declaring a new age for Russia, as it's now going to be just a huge collection of different countries. Alright, so a peace treaty will be held over here in the capital of the Polish country, and the first part of the peace treaty is to return the southern Civilisation countries to how they were before. Aral has got all their land back, the orange team, the pink team, the dark green team, who's a lot smaller, is also back, and you see the blue country, who's lost a bit of land over here, and then the red team, and the northern Baikal is here, along with southern Baikal, who will then unite together. Baikal has lost a bit of land. If you go into Pax Arabia, you can see, okay, you see they lost some land over here, and I thought they had lost some to the Koreans, but maybe not. Anyway, let's go on to the next bit of the peace treaty. We then see the liberation of the 3 Baltic countries and also Astrakhan, and now Russia's kind of back to the kind of pre-World War I state, I think. Yeah, well, with Ukraine, which is going to be resolved in a second. Okay, so Russia's been taken out with Muscovy and Uralia now existing here. So they bring back another country over here in the west, the Ingrian country, who's going to actually get a bit more expansion eastwards, as some of the land over here in Muscovy is technically their land, and Muscovy needs to be punished for what they've done, being Russia. So, yeah, that happens to them. So yeah, Ukraine's back, not quite how they used to look, because it goes to layer 35, which I think is just post World War, whatever it was, one. These two look like this. However, the new Ukraine looks actually better. Good job, me, for drawing nice borders. Ukraine looks cool, and now we just have this empty space to divide up. We'll see some expansion of the Ingrian country, just slightly south. They take over this weird, whatever, take over this province and this province over here from the Muscovy country. But yes, making new countries in this area. So we see 4 new Russian countries created, with a purplish one, a blue one, a yellow one, and another blue one. Because there's not enough blue in this region apparently, which there definitely is. I didn't think about this when I made the old Estonian country, so I could just change the color, but I probably won't. Anyway, so that's Western Russia done, but now we need to get to the rest of these guys. Alright, so the pink country over here, they're very nationalist about the fact they're a Central Asian religion country, and so for that reason they want to expand northwards into this territory. However, the other countries don't really want to do that, because other countries they think should get expansion instead, due to the fact they've lost land, like the dark green country or the blue country. So they signed a treaty with the orange team, which will allow them to take this land in exchange for the orange country taking this territory, because they can't really claim on that, and this province I didn't want to give them, but yeah, you're not getting that, mate. So there we go. Here's our new borders over here. And the orange country gets this province, because it would have joined the pink team, however it didn't, because it was too far away from the central government, and I just want to make their borders better, man. That's it, really. And then to these 3 guys, they don't really want territorial compensation. Instead, what they want is a division of this territory rather than keeping it all as one. And yeah, they're going to get what they want, as 2 Russian countries are created, one in this huge blue area, and then another very bright sort of rose pink one. And then Uralia is just left, like this, and I'm going to find the capital, I think. Capital found. But since the Uralian country got divided up, they're like, maybe we should do that to Muscovy too, just for safety, and also, let's make sure another Russia can't form, because that was scary as hell. Alright, so now they've created a few new countries with a very small blue one down here, a pretty large lilac one over here, and then a very large orangey one around here. So Russia has been fully partitioned up. Yeah, this is weird. We've lost Russia, we've lost the Arab Union, we've lost China. Asia, or just Eurasia in general, is completely different to how it looked like 10 episodes ago. In episode 90, it looked so different to this. And there you go. That is the end of our 3 Cold War powers. All of them are gone, and the world is going to enter an even newer age. Going to see changing power rankings too. And we've got the Franco Union asserting even more dominance over Europe with a whole load of new weak countries. So that's pretty fun, really. And yeah, I'll see you again next time. This episode was a bit long, but also it was episode 100, so you know, I feel like that's fair. And yeah, see you again next time. Goodbye, and have a nice rest of your day. Goodbye. Subscribe too.